Let's discuss parental impacts on sibling relationships. Hello, and welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Jameelah, and I am a master manifester, and I'm sure you are too because you are tuned in, tapped into content like this. The name of this channel is Holistic Manifesting because I believe in a whole body, whole mind, and whole being experience when it comes to manifesting these amazing lives that we are choosing. What I'm discussing in this video is how parents impact the relationships between siblings and households. I think sometimes people grow up and they just believe that so-and-so is close with their sibling, but I'm just not. And they sort of blame it on the sibling connection only. A lot of times they always say, we just don't get along. We have different interests. We never really liked each other. We never really hung out with each other. We never really had each other's backs. But I challenge you to look a little bit deeper into why that might be, because there's usually always, some breadcrumbs leading you down that trail to where you don't have a connection fully with your siblings or a particular sibling, right? And so I'm going to discuss, I think it's 3 ways, but if I fall short, then forgive me. But I'm going to discuss some ways that parents can negatively impact the relationships that siblings have. The number one that I've noticed in relationships where siblings have issues is triangulation. Triangulation is used when you have more than one sibling and the parent will go to one of them and share one version of a story or something like that. And then they'll go to another and share another version of a story. And somehow in that story, there's a negative impact on one sibling to the other. And both those stories, it makes the parent look good. So for example, it may be, I was telling your sister about how beautiful your home looked when I came to visit, right? And then when I told her, I was like, oh, this is nice, that's nice. She was like, I don't really like that style. And they kind of throw it in on a slide. So then you're hearing sideways. It's like, oh, my sister says she didn't like my style or the way that my home is decorated or the way that my home is fixed up, And you've heard other things, but you pick that up in the conversation. And then they go to the other one and say, yeah, I was telling her about your house and stuff like that. Like I was telling her that you said, good things about our house and all that kind of stuff, and that y'all styles are just a little bit different, and your style is a little bit more high class and hers just a little bit kind of lower. And then this one's going around feeling like, well, yeah, I do put more effort in. I do kind of add more class to what I'm doing. And then the whole while you've got this competition or negative energy going on between them because two different stories have been told, 2 different perspectives, but it's been used to manipulate. And it's used to manipulate so that there can be deeper reasons, right? But from my perspective, it's used to manipulate so that this parent can always have the kids on their side and not on each other's side. Because if they get on each other's side, then they'll realize the negative manipulation that the parent has been putting out there. This doesn't have to just be done between siblings. This can be done with other people that are related to the family or connected to the family in some kind of way. Like they tell one a story about, how great they're doing with this or that or whatever. And then that person walks away feeling good. Then they go tell the other one, it's just like, I didn't really like what she was doing. I didn't really like her hair. I didn't really like her outfit or whatever. And then they have a conversation about that. These two get together and you're just like, oh, well, Mom said, she really liked my hair. She really liked the style. And they're like, well, when I talked to her, she was like, she wasn't really feeling it or whatever. And you're like, really? But she told me that. So then it seems like, is this sibling trying to get in my head? Or is my mom telling 2 different stories? Triangulation. The only way to solve problems related to triangulation is to get the people in the same room and bring up the subject and have the conversation. But I'll be honest with you, I've seen this play out. And the parent that's creating the triangulation issues, they're so steeped into victimhood, ultimately, that you're never going to get what you want to get out of those conversations. It's always going to come back on you as being offended. And it always works out in this way to where The person that the offense was put on is usually the person that's told to suck up the offense. You always bringing up old stuff. You worrying about things that don't matter. And it's usually the person that's told to suck it up is the one who had to take the brunt of the offense. So I always tell people, don't waste your time. This is purely for information. This is not even something that I'm experiencing in my life, but this is purely information from my own observations, right? Another way is they set up competition between those siblings. So it's like the siblings don't even get an opportunity to really embrace and indulge each other. I've seen this happen, especially with mothers when it comes to their daughters' looks a lot, and I've seen it all over TV shows, movies, in environments, personal and all this stuff, where they're more partial to one of the children's looks than they are to the other. I was so deliberate about not raising my daughters that way. So deliberate. I didn't want any of that negative energy in my house and space. Matter of fact, I kept them out of environments where I felt like people were going to be comparing them to each other, because the comparisons only work to add a negative interaction between the siblings, because it puts them in this competitive mode. Even if they don't want to compete with each other, they start to feel like, well, everybody thinks you're better than me. And you have to watch it too, because other people will play into that game. They'll come around and they'll say things to one sibling. It's just like, oh, she's so amazing. This person so this person so that, this person so that. And they'll never, ever compliment you. They'll never give you a compliment. And it's intentional. It's not happenstance. People know when they're gassing up somebody else's look, or my daughter calls it glazing. That's one thing. You hang around teenagers too much, you're going to pick up some new terms every other week, because that's how quickly their little slang changes. They're glazing somebody else, and it's like you may have something similar or the same thing going on, but they make sure not to add you to that equation. Or like somebody will come around and be like, oh, well, beautiful women have to go through this. And it's just like, oh, like so-and-so, they're beautiful. Or like so-and-so, they're beautiful. And you're sitting right in their face and you're just like, well, aren't I beautiful? Aren't I beautiful to some degree? And they will never mention it or whatever. This happens a lot with people. Parents are very guilty of that. And it's because sometimes it's colorism. Sometimes it's one's partial to hair textures. I've grown up in environments where these were things that mothers were doing. And you're just like, really? They're partial to body types, shapes and all this kind of stuff. They can be partial to male attention, these kind of things, right? And they'll always act like one is better than the other. And what happens is it puts a rift or a wedge in between those friendships actually forming, because there's always this underlying idea that this person is better than me. And it's not that you even believe it. It's just that is the seed that is being planted in those environments, right? I've seen this. This is what the whole trope is of like most of those romantic comedy things, where you have this one flashy sibling and then you have this one nerdy sibling, whatever. And the one guy is like the football, what do they call them? Jocks and stuff. All the girls run to him, this and that and all that kind of thing. But then this girl that he's with notices this brother who's more intellectual, more, nerdy and stuff. And he's just like, and she's like, oh, well, maybe you're the one, And so that causes this rift between, because the parents are always giving, they call it a golden child, giving attention to the one that gets the most attention. And then you have the other one that's got a lot of great qualities. And when somebody actually notices the great qualities, they're like, really? And because they've overlooked that child, they refuse to acknowledge it. And that puts a wedge in between that relationship. I've seen it, movies, tropes, real life, other people's lives. As I say, these are not things that I'm necessarily an expert on in any kind of way, but I do notice these things. And I've been seeing quite a bit of content lately about siblings wondering why they don't have good connections. And a last one that I'll talk about is kind of in a similar vein, but it's a little bit different, is the competitive thing. So they'll have their kids competing in ways that are not healthy, right? So if one is a really good grades, they'll compare them all the time to the other one. And I was really deliberate about that with my daughters, because when you have two in the household, it's just two. It's so easy for them to look at this one and look at that one. Matter of fact, They compare things about themselves in a positive way that I don't even consider. I was telling her, one of my older daughter, my oldest, I only have two. The older one sent me a screenshot of her grades, right? And it was straight A's per usual. But it was like one of the classes was one that she was struggling with for a second, as she called it, a struggle when she has a B. It's a different mindset, right? They don't even want to see my grades when I was in high school. But she was having trouble with that class, and I told the younger one, I was just like, oh yeah, Mariah sent me her grades or whatever. And she was just like, what? She was like, I'm trying to be her. Chemistry's messing me up. That was her mindset automatically. Like it wasn't like oh, I don't care about her grades. Oh, well, who cares? Whatever. Because I've never done that in the household. So her response was, oh my gosh, I want to be her. I got to get my chemistry out of a B. She's complaining about a B. But it was such a sweet, I want to be her kind of thing. It was such an homage to her older sister, doing well in school. And her older sister has done the same thing with her. She was like, I wish I would have took my classes more seriously when I was in 9th grade like you are, because I didn't. And it's come back to bite me all the way as a senior. She was like 2 points short of getting a scholarship for the college that she's choosing. And I was like, you know what? It starts way earlier than that. And she was like, I just didn't. COVID was happening because she came through that era, and they came through without proper instruction from that time, and it was an impact on her. And she kind of was like lackadaisical about her education. So she's always telling her sister, make sure you do this because I didn't do that, and you're much better at me than this. You're much smarter at me than this. Make sure whatever. And I love to see it because there's like zero competition between these girls, and it's wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. But nonetheless, that's what they'll do. They'll plant a seed of competition. Then when one of them does something great, they can't even acknowledge. They got to go through so much emotional maneuvering to just acknowledge that somebody else is being great or doing great or living great. Or they got to be so intentional. It's not even just like an automatic thing because they didn't see it coming from the parents. And this is the last one that I thought of right before I was starting the video. A parent, when they create negative sibling relationships, they lean really hard emotionally, physically, or financially and stuff like that on one child and not on the other. And generally, it's because you have one child that's a really strong empath or something like that, and another one who's not. And what happens is, in these tropes, I'll call them life tropes, one of them gets to go off and live their life because they refuse to not do that. And then the other one stays close because they feel sorry for the parent. They feel sorry for the victim mindset that they might have. And so the kid, the siblings wind up resenting each other because one parent leaned really hard on one and then not on the other one. And the reason why they didn't lean hard on the other one is because it wasn't going to work. Because the other one's just like, no, you need to not be a victim. You need to take care of yourself emotionally, and you need to figure yourself out like every other adult has to do, right? But the other one is just like, they're going to lean on it. They're going to take it. They're going to be an empath. They're going to suck up all that negative energy. And then that creates sometimes a rift between siblings because they feel like, I've been here. I've been showing up. I've been doing this. I've been, the emotional punching bag or whatever for the parent. And then you've been off just living your life and doing all these things or whatever and stuff and being who you want to be and not, throwing away your prime on being somebody's emotional, punching bag. And it's like the siblings don't realize it's just like, but the parent is the cause of that. By needing to lean so hard on the children emotionally, that's what caused that rift, right? I know this is a touchy subject for some people, but I have clarity with some of these things. I can see it clearly. And I was always a very intentional parent, and I always wanted to make sure that I wasn't creating environments to where my children didn't like each other. I didn't want them to see each other as competition. I didn't want them to see each other as somebody that they needed to one up or somebody that they couldn't give compliments to, right? It's like so beautiful. This morning I was putting some curls in my younger daughter's hair, and then the older one is like, oh, it's so pretty. She was like, oh, your hair is so pretty. She was like, I love it or whatever. It's never a thing like she think her hair is cute or whatever, because I was around environments that were like that, or she thinks she's like this, or she thinks she's this, or she thinks she's special, she thinks she's smart, she thinks she's beautiful, she thinks she's her what don't stink or whatever. And in my world, I want my sister to feel like that about themselves, Because yeah, you need to feel good. You need to feel like you better than this behavior, you better than that behavior. Because that is what grows us, right? Nobody wants to see their sibling or their sister or their brother sitting there being a pick me and getting used and abused in relationships, and being talked down upon and being treated badly. It's like, if you want to see that, there's something wrong there. Even you can be neutral and still not want to see negative things, right? I had somebody tell me once about their own siblings. They literally said, "You want to see your sibling? I like to see my siblings suffer, but not too much." Because then it becomes sad. And I'm like, why would you want to see them suffer in any degree, in any capacity whatsoever, right? And then you look further into those relationships and you see where they come from a direct connection of a parent who was causing cruelty, who was causing mischief, who was triangulating, who was making people compete, who was talking negatively or ugly about other people when the other one wasn't around, right? Or who was, preaching competition, or who was putting one on a pedestal and not complimenting the other, or who wasn't able to give compliments at all to children in any kind of way. And then there's not an emotional connection, and then we wonder why it's so easy for people to just not interact and not be close and not, have these regular interactions. Because if you're not able to be trauma bonded with these connections, then at some point other siblings move on. And so sometimes that is the case, right? There's a lot of negative energy that was deposited and it hasn't been cleaned out to some degree, right? Nonetheless, that's all I got on that. Sometimes we're trying to figure out why siblings aren't close and why they don't have connections. And it's literally, you can trace it right back to the parental interactions and what they created amongst the siblings. Anyway, I hope y'all have a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful day.